Welcome into the Cheeley Law Review. My name is Ben Burnett. My guest today is Bob Cheeley himself in his own office. Bob, how are you?
Doing great, better than I deserve.
Bob, today I want to talk about trucking companies and the standards at which they hire and have to maintain in order to keep everyone safe. And oftentimes, when a firm like yours gets involved, it is because those standards are breached. Can you talk about 21st century examples of how most of the time the companies that have been around a long time seek to actively do the right thing, and when that comes in conflict with the safety and welfare of the American public?
Sure, Ben. Just as anything, we're seeing a lot of improvements in this particular area of society, and that is technology. Technology is making the roads safer by holding truck drivers accountable. Some of the things that have been adopted somewhat slowly, but now picking up steam, I think, is things like cameras in the cab to hold the truck drivers accountable. And this is a way that their employer can have a video record of what occurred during a particular trip that may have involved a collision. That's a good thing to have those cameras focused on the driver in the cab, because the driver knows that nobody's watching them, and they tend to do things that put the public, the motoring public and passenger vehicles around them at risk. So we've had cases where drivers were doing something inappropriate, where there were no cameras in the truck, but based on evidence that we developed, we know that from cell phone records they were on their phone while driving. All trucking companies and federal regulations require that drivers not be on their telephones while driving. So the cameras in the cab do have a tendency to make those truck drivers take seriously those regulations. So that's a good thing.
Talk about some of the circumstances that you've seen in the last few years where companies were seeking to do the right thing, and the individual that was operating the vehicle or the truck, the 18-wheeler, was not doing the right thing, and what the outcomes were that were ultimately affected with those individuals being out of compliance.
One case that comes to mind involved where a number of young people in passenger cars were struck in the rear by a tractor-trailer truck on the interstate, and there were 5 young ladies who lost their lives and 2 were injured. In that situation, we developed evidence that the truck driver was on his cell phone for a rather lengthy period of time, streaming inappropriate content. We know that the policies of that trucking company for every driver prohibited the drivers from being on their phones and doing that sort of thing, but they had no way of verifying whether or not their drivers were complying with those policies. And one of the criticisms that we had in that case was they didn't require the cell phones to be turned off and put away during trips. Also, they didn't have cameras in the cab. And as a result, this man was not focused upon what was his number one job, was to drive that truck in a safe manner. He ran over 2 cars and killed 5 young ladies. That man wound up going to prison for that, and families lost their daughters because of that negligence. So it's very important that companies do all they can using technology to make sure their drivers comply with the federal regulations and with the corporate policies.
As you look in 2024, trucking is an industry that has been very, very negatively impacted by current economic conditions, by a developing workforce, and the jobs become harder to fill. Talk about the tenure of your average truck driver in 2024 and what you are seeing companies do that may be putting the public at risk, hiring people that aren't quite ready to be on the road to operate a vehicle like that.
Yeah, it's spooky. I've seen a lot of cases where, first of all, the industry has experienced a tremendous amount of turnover. I've read surveys which show that the typical turnover rate for drivers for established trucking companies can be over 100% per year. 110, 120% per year turnover. Part of that is there's just so few drivers entering the workforce while the seasoned drivers are aging out and retiring. young people don't want to drive trucks. And so more and more we're seeing immigrants to this country that don't speak English and can't read signs, roadway signs, becoming ones who are operating these 80,000-pound deadly vehicles if they're not properly trained. So I see a lot of poaching of drivers from one company to another. They'll offer signing bonuses, $5,000, $10,000 to change jobs. The big struggle for these companies is finding qualified drivers, training them, and retaining them long term so that they're not constantly trying to find a warm body to fill the seat.
As somebody who has sat in legal matters with dozens of these types of cases, is there any immediate change that you think that industry should make in order to keep the public safer in a holistic way? Absolutely,
yeah. The statistics show that 90% of the deaths and catastrophic injuries that occur involving big trucks is from rear-end collisions, passenger vehicles with a big truck colliding into them. And what the trucking companies can do is they can, for only a couple $1,000s per tractor trailer, they can equip those vehicles with automated or autonomous braking systems so that through a camera and a radar mounted in the front of the truck, it can automatically brake the truck when it senses cars slowing down ahead of it. Distracted drivers are the big trucks are the leading cause of deaths and catastrophic injuries. And so technology can really help minimize the severity of those collisions.
This has been another episode of the Cheeley Law Review. See you guys next week.